everybody. Welcome back to Social Chain. My name is Adam, and I just wanted to talk about Bitcoin, UFOs or UAPs, as well as the Epstein files. And the main thread connecting all of these is our ability to know things and to change our stance on things based off of information that we are gathering. And mostly, actually, an observation that most of us are not willing to look into new data as it's coming in, specifically if it's data that goes against our current beliefs or our current base propositions or the axiomatic truths that we hold to be self-evident, right? So this comes off of some conversations I've had with a few of my friends, and I'm doing it on purpose. Specifically the UFO part, I'm doing it on purpose. I'm actually bringing up UFOs to see if they are willing to integrate this new, I think, valid information. I mean, there's nothing about the information from what I've seen that makes it sus or suspect. To integrate this new information into their current understanding of the world without making any making any further propositions or statements about there being little green men. I do like theorizing about aliens, and I'll probably include my own theorization at the end with a conversation with ChatGPT about what these unidentified flying objects or aerial phenomenon might be. And I just think it's a fun thought experiment. I don't take it seriously as in I'm proposing that I know what it is. But this is the information landscape that we're in. And I'm really interested in it because I've been talking to people a lot about Bitcoin and crypto, and you can see how much people have not looked into the information. They haven't been following it, and yet they are very certain of themselves. The same thing, of course, can be said with UAPs or UFOs. There's a lot of information that's been coming out over the past, I would say, 8 years. And this information spans over the past 2 decades, ranging from the 2004 Tic Tac incident to the most recent one, the 2024 October Yemen, off the coast of Yemen, Predator drone Hellfire missile incident. But again, how does this relate to Bitcoin? And I'll get to the Epstein files in a bit. It's just the fact that you have information coming out. There's a slew of information from pretty high quality sources, I would say, at this point when it comes to Bitcoin or UFOs, and the average person is not familiar with that information. I don't think we can blame them. But when you talk with them about it, the interesting part for me is they have no interest in looking at the information or trying to understand what the information is, because they've essentially accepted the common narratives, which again, I'm not against the common narratives. I think overall the Occam's razor, like what makes the most sense for the given phenomenon, is usually what we want to go to. But what I'm claiming again is that there's an inability to integrate new valid information for most people. And I think it really helps explain why we miss opportunities. I've spoken to a lot of people about the internet, and specifically about like people who I call them the gray hairs, right? People, baby boomers, my parents' generation. Where were they when the internet was coming out? Why didn't they invest, right? Was the information out there? Did they know people who were talking about it? And usually they will say, I know a few people were talking about it, they're very excited about it. I didn't know, like everyone kind of, we heard about it, we didn't know the potential. And the thing is, the real question is, but could you have known? So like Wired magazine probably existed, maybe in the 80s, definitely in the 90s. Were they writing about the potential? Were they selling you an idea? No one knows for sure. That's why it's a risk. It's a bit of a speculation. But could you have become sufficiently informed to take a calculated risk on these things and not to brush it off, right? I think the answer is most people cannot. They literally could, like it was out there for them, but in their headspace prevents them from actually doing this investigation. And I will say of myself, I'll toot my own horn here, and I know a few other people feel this way. There are some people who are more high in openness, the big 5 like psychological traits. I definitely, people have told me too, like you seem really high in openness. I'm not. It doesn't mean I'm fully open to everything all the time. I'm very critical and analytical, but I'm willing to explore ideas. Like if you give me a good source of information, I'm willing to like consider it. And when someone came up to me and talked to me about Bitcoin, I'm willing to consider it. When I watch the UFO stuff, maybe from Breaking Points or other coverage, late night talk shows or CNN, I'm willing to entertain it. I'm just curious. As long as the information quality is good, right? If it's kind of more like flat Earth stuff, you'll very quickly lose me because I'll start asking some questions and I'll start seeing, well, there's not good answers for me. So let's talk about the Epstein files as well. I'll get into the UFO stuff in a bit, but just to finish off the Epstein, why am I talking about Epstein? Is because My understanding is that Alex Jones, the right-wing crackpot who like literally has psychological problems, a massive conspiracy theorist, was talking about pedophilic sex rings and like trafficking of women by elites, ambiguous elites, for a long time. He was part of the reason why that Pizzagate thing, where the guy showed up with an assault rifle at a pizza parlor or whatever, a pizza restaurant in the United States, actually happened. And we know that Epstein he was arrested 2008, 2007, 2008. So it was actually known that he was actually charged with, I guess it was like statutory rape of adolescents and trafficking and soliciting sex acts from minors, something like this. So that information is out there in the ether. Not a lot of people are aware of Epstein at that point in time. I wasn't until, of course, the more recent thing in 2019. So no one's really aware of Epstein, but you've got Alex Jones talking about it. Now, Alex Jones is totally out to left field, right? He's talking about the gay bomb, which you look into it, was an actual device that I believe the U.S. military looked into to see if they could somehow, use pheromones to make enemy combatants, become homosexual and, drop their guns somehow and want to have sex with each other. Like, I don't know the exact, like, what they were exactly trying to do with it, but they were really just trying to see if they could change people to become gay. He was talking about the frogs being gay, which is a total meme. I mean, like, look, he's all over the place, and he's absorbing these little snippets of information and proposing knowledge that he simply doesn't have, and that's oftentimes false. And what I want to say here about the Alex Jones thing is that he was latching onto something when it comes to elites around the world. Bill Clinton has been on the Jeffrey Epstein flight logs. Bill Gates was on there. Apparently, there's an association with Elon Musk. When they raided Epstein's house, there was like all sorts of information in there about the people he was dealing with at the very high levels of society. Now, it's just, we can't prove what they were doing, if they were on the island and what they were trying to do, but very, very concerning. So there's all this real data that did exist at the time when Alex Jones was making these claims. Very real data insofar as these things were actually happening. And yet we're so dismissive as a society to say this is absolutely insane. Of course, Alex Jones, the purveyor of the information, is insane. But nonetheless, there was a there, to use this more common way of speaking. And so again, like, this is what I'm asking is how do we integrate new pieces of information when they go against our common established norms? How do we join in on a paradigm shift, so whether it's a paradigm shift in physics or how gravity works, or whether or not there's quantum particles, or the state of money, or the state of information technology, and so on. Like, how do we as a society, and as individuals more importantly, I mean, forget about society, as an individual, how do we do this operation? And I feel like if we're unable to do this operation, if we're unable to imagine, you talk about AI as well, that for the longest time in the field of AI, a lot of people were really down on it, and the kind of grandfather of AI, I believe, is working at the University of Toronto, actually, was saying, like, there wasn't a lot of funding. Like, everyone just thought it was a crackpot thing. This will never happen. It's been worked on. It will never happen. And these few researchers didn't give up, and now the field's exploded. But it took these people pushing against the established norms to get it done. So again, my questioning here is just, how do we integrate new information? How do we push against established norms when it makes sense? How do we know when it makes sense to push against established norms too? I mean, that's a hard problem as well. Like, am I arguing like, flat Earth is against established norms? Let's go for flat Earth, right? Or some crackpot theory about environmental degradation based off of human interaction, right? And greenhouse gases. Like, where do we go for these sources? How do we integrate them? Let me flip to the UFO conversation now. And you'll forgive me for this being a little off the cuff. I mean, it definitely is, but it has been on my mind quite a lot. So going to the UFO one, which is the one I'm most interested in talking about with individuals, there have been reports now spanning over the past 7 years or so. I think since 2016, 2017, that's when it's kind of started trickling out. That there are fighter pilots in America who are coming out and saying that we are witnessing, we're interacting with these things in the sky. We don't know what they are. They're actually a risk when we're doing our training drills off the various coast of California, off the East Coast, and we see them and we don't want to report them because of course there is you look like a crackpot, right? You'll look like someone who's lost their marbles, but they'll come back to base and they'll ask the other fighter pilots who are just out there, whether or not they've seen it, and they say, yeah, we've seen it too. There's been all sorts of reports now of various phenomenon that they can't explain, and there are now radar, there video footage of radar. It's all in black and white because these systems don't actually detect objects. They don't actually use the visible spectrum, the colored spectrum that we're used to. They're using different electromagnetic spectrums to capture this information, right? So there's a lot of these black and white kind of granular footage. Again, it's the actual radar systems that these military grade crafts will use. And it's not important that they see, black, red, green, blue, these kind of colors. And more of them have shown up and shown us these objects that are moving in weird ways that defy what we believe are drones, that move at speeds that are unexpected for any known human crafts. They don't leave propulsion signatures in the way that we would imagine. One fighter jet pilot said that it was actually actively engaging with him and jamming his ability to radar this unidentified flying object that he was circling around. And the latest one was the Hellfire missile that a kind of a Reaper drone, I believe, shot while another drone was filming it. And the Hellfire missile, which is very accurate from what I understand. It's usually an air to ground missile. Of course, it was on these drones because they're not doing dogfighting. They're drones, unmanned drones that would go over and attack, land targets from the air. So it had this missile. They decided to engage in the target, this target that wasn't responding to them, and fired that missile. It's a highly accurate missile, usually not used for air-to-air, just to be fair, but still highly accurate when it has line of sight. And it's very, very good at detonation. Like upon impact, it basically universally detonates. Like it's very reliable. It hit this thing. It seems like it hit this thing, bounced off of it, and the thing that still went on its way took the hit and just went on its way. It was very unexpected interaction. And again, no one knows what these things are. Obviously, the propositions here is that it is part of the U.S. military, but it's a deeper level of the U.S. military that is guarded under kind of cloaks, and is not responsible to messaging the rest of the U.S. military as well as the U.S. public. It's an adversarial technology, so that would be. Everyone's like really the only other nation that would be coming close to this technology would be China, and they have seems superior drone technology right now currently. So that could be them. Of course, was it them in 2004 when these reports were coming out? It seems vastly unlikely that in 2004 China or any other nation would have this technology. And the third one is that these are crafts that are from basically another civilization. They're the remnants of another civilization. So there's lots of reports coming out now. There's Congress hearings that are happening in the United States. There's also international reports, but obviously the focus is more on the English language ones because that's where the reporting that we can understand in this hemisphere, in this area of the world. And the question is, how do you look at this and not dismiss it right away? Because I understand too. I feel like I'm a pretty skeptical person, but the automatic knee-jerk reaction is to dismiss it. And why is that though? Like, why can't we just explore it and be like, okay, I definitely don't believe that aliens have contacted us. Here's all the logical reasons why this probably isn't aliens. Also, this is very interesting. Okay, this is propulsion methods that aren't known to us. This is technology that hasn't been seen on this planet so far. There's dwindling possibilities of what these things could be. It could be that all these trained pilots are seeing the wrong things. They're wrong about what they're seeing. That's a possibility. The radar footage is not within context. These are actually air balloons, and they're actually moving at speeds that are much slower. Like, we're not able to, when the lay public looks at this radar footage, we're not able to interpret it in a sound way. All of these theories are possible, but when you look at what's happening, you go, okay, I understand all the possibilities here. This is still very creepy. And you've got, even Barack Obama on late night television after he was president. This is like 2016, 17, or 18 or something. He's out there. I think it was Jimmy Fallon or something. And he's saying, or Jimmy Kimmel, like there are things in the air that we don't know what they are. That's what he's saying, and he's willing to come out on national TV and say that now. And that's what a lot of these fighter pilots are saying too, and investigative journalists who have looked into this. You've got even Michio Kaku, the Japanese-American physicist, just looking at it and saying, he understands what the concerns are. And right now, there's just a lot of evidence adding up. And the way that we do science is we take this evidence, we verify the validness of the evidence and the sources. And based off of that, he's saying, there's a lot of good evidence right now that we have to explain what this stuff is, and it's not okay just to do a hand-wavy dismissal. Which, of course, brings me back to Bitcoin, right? There's a lot of things going on in the Bitcoin community And there's a lot of hand waving and dismissing going on, and this is the connection between all these three things. And I'll ask this question again, like, how do we integrate new paradigms and new changes? How do we get data from things that are unexpected and incorporate them into our worldview? How do we deal charitably and justly with new data without being so dismissive and tribal in a way? And again, you don't know me personally, but I'm a very skeptical person. I'm very much about academic research and journals. I don't like talking about the spiritual, the demonic. I mentioned before, I'm an atheist and an anti-theist. I don't think that theism is healthy for us. And a lot of that is predicated on the sources of this data and the clear fallibility of it, and the irrationalness of our falling into these sects and cults and groups and tribes over this data that, again, is clearly in my opinion, I mean, it's clearly man-made. There's basically a 0% chance that this data that these books, these learnings came from any sort of divine source. Now, it is possible. I'm not fully. It is possible, but there's nothing that I've seen that remotely signifies that. And in fact, most of the things I've seen and understood, and I've read the Quran, I've read parts of the Bible, and I was raised Catholic. There's nothing that I've heard or seen that would give me any hope, actually, that these things come from a divine source. It's actually all the opposite from what I've seen so far. Yeah, again, my question though is how do we judge these new bits of data when they go against our worldview? Crypto is one of the biggest ones. Very interesting for me. The hate against crypto will keep growing even as Bitcoin keeps going, and at some point I do foresee the masses eventually we go through that S-curve adoption curve, and now most people kind of get it, and all the young people, all the Gen Alpha people were like, why didn't you older people understand what was going on? I mean, we get it, this thing makes sense, and they'll have a hard time understanding how controversial it was today. They'll have to look back and see how controversial it was to really understand why their parents weren't in on it, basically. And again, that's really what I wanted to say here, what I wanted to focus on here. I guess the last thing I will say is, when we miss opportunities in life, one thing we might want to ask is, like, how could we have been someone who would have not missed that opportunity, right? So what would it have meant for me to be someone who wasn't so dismissive of that person with a business opportunity, who wasn't so dismissive of Bitcoin, who wasn't so dismissive of the possibility of elites, some elites getting dirt on each other and being part of the Epstein files? Like, what would it have mean? Would I have had to open up my worldview, become more of an open person? Would I have had to actively done more research than just simply passively allowing mainstream news and media to tell me what's right and what's wrong? It's just an interesting question. I'm not gonna give you the answer here. I definitely have some suspicions of my own, but it's something that we can all ask ourselves, especially in this very polarized society where everyone's kind of perpetually online and angry with each other, and there's new stories every other day breaking out that are just taking over the entire zeitgeist of the English-speaking world, at least. How do we fight against these things? And if we're stuck, unable to critically analyze new information that questions and destabilizes our worldview, how can we ever get ahead of other people and opportunities and integrate something new and exciting before it's already here? So how can you be a market player that takes calculated risks if you're unable to integrate forward-looking news that offends your current assumptions about the world? I think that's as best as I will state it, so I'll leave it there. Thanks for joining me on the Satoshi Chain, and I'll catch you next time. Bye now.